The sound of her keys hitting the kitchen counter cut through the silence like a blade. 2 weeks, 14 days of radio silence, and now Seren Redden walked back into our home as if she'd been grocery shopping. I didn't look up from my laptop immediately. The quarterly security audit for Morrison Tech required my attention, and frankly, I needed those extra seconds to prepare myself for whatever story she'd crafted during her absence. Mason. Her voice carried that familiar tone, controlled, measured, like she was addressing a difficult employee in her HR department. Seren. I saved my work and closed the laptop, finally meeting her eyes. She looked different. Tanned, maybe. Relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. She dropped her overnight bag on the chair beside the kitchen island, the same chair where she used to sit every morning with her coffee and phone, scrolling through work emails before most people were awake. I need to explain where I've been? Do you? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. After 12 years of marriage, I knew her tells. The slight tightening around her eyes when she was calculating her next words. The way she touched her wedding ring when she was about to lie. She wasn't touching her ring. I spent 2 weeks with Derek, for closure. Derek Ashby. Her college boyfriend, the real estate hotshot, who'd somehow remained a fixture in our social circle, despite my obvious discomfort with his presence at every gathering. The guy who still looked at my wife like she was the one who got away. I didn't ask why she needed closure with an ex-boyfriend after 12 years of marriage. I didn't ask where they went or what they did. Instead, I stood up, walked to the sink, and began washing the single coffee mug I'd used that morning. The same routine I'd maintained for 14 days while wondering if my wife was coming back. Which credit card did you use on the third night? The question came out calm, conversational, like I was asking about the weather. But I watched her reflection in the kitchen window above the sink. She stopped moving entirely. Her hand started reaching for her phone on the counter, fingers trembling slightly. I'd seen that reaction before, during the incident with her former assistant who'd been embezzling petty cash. Seren always reached for her phone when she needed to buy time to think. I turned around, dried my hands with the dish towel, and picked up her phone before her fingers made contact. Mason, give me my phone. In a minute. I swiped up, grateful she'd never changed her passcode from our anniversary date. Her email app was still open, and there it was, a confirmation from the Grandview Resort in Asheville. Room 412, 2 guests, 3 nights. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. It was the date on the receipt. 3 days into her supposed closure trip, she'd upgraded to the honeymoon suite. I set the phone back on the counter and looked at her. Really looked at her. The tan wasn't from casual outdoor activities. It was the kind of even, careful tan you get lounging by a pool. The relaxed expression wasn't from resolution or emotional healing. It was satisfaction. The honeymoon suite was an extra $120 per night, I said, my voice still conversational. Seemed like expensive closure. Serene's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, calculation, defiance, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. Mason, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You've always been good with explanations. I walked past her toward the stairs. I'm going to bed. We can talk more tomorrow. That's it? You're not going to yell? Demand details? I paused at the bottom of the staircase. Would it change anything? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my home office. The room Seren had always complained was too cluttered with computer equipment and old IT manuals. The irony wasn't lost on me that this cluttered space was about to become very useful. I started with the basics. Our joint accounts, the ones I'd set up years ago when we'd combined finances like the responsible married couple we were supposed to be. The savings account, checking, the credit cards, all linked to my social security number as the primary holder, with Seren as an authorized user. It took me 3 hours to methodically remove her access from everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, the family phone plan, streaming services, cloud storage, every digital connection we shared. By dawn, Seren Redden was no longer authorized to spend money that came from my work or access files stored under my accounts. I also discovered something interesting while reviewing our cloud storage. Seren's phone had been automatically backing up her photos and messages for years. She'd apparently forgotten about this feature, because the backup from her trip told a story quite different from closure. Photos of Derek and her at romantic dinners, screenshots of texts between them dating back 6 months, planning this getaway, voice messages where she complained about our marriage and fantasized about what life would be like if she'd married Derek instead. But the most interesting file was a voice memo she'd recorded accidentally, probably when her phone was in her purse, a conversation with her friend Lila about how to handle the situation when she got home. "Just tell him it was closure." Lila's voice was clear through the phone speaker. "Men understand that concept. They think women need to resolve things emotionally. He'll probably be relieved you're not asking for couples therapy. But what if he asks questions? Mason, please. He's been buried in his computer for months. He probably barely noticed you were gone." "You're right. And honestly, Lila, I don't think I can pretend anymore. Derek makes me feel alive again. Mason just doesn't." I listened to that recording 3 times before saving multiple copies to different drives. The next morning, Seren came downstairs dressed for work, moving through her normal routine. Coffee, yogurt, check phone, grab keys. Except when she tried to check her phone, she discovered her cloud backup had failed and her banking app was asking for new authorization. "Mason, something's wrong with my phone. My photos are gone, and I can't access our account." I looked up from my own phone, where I was reviewing the voice memo transcript I'd had automatically generated. "That's strange. Maybe you should call tech support." She tried. For 20 minutes, she spoke with various customer service representatives, who all told her the same thing. The account holder had removed her authorization, and they couldn't restore it without his approval. "Mason." Her voice had an edge now. "What did you do?" "I protected our assets. After reviewing the charges from your closure trip, I realized someone had been using our accounts without proper authorization. I secured everything until we can sort out what's legitimate and what's not. You can't lock me out of our accounts. I'm your wife. You're an authorized user. There's a difference." I stood up, straightening my tie. "I'm going to work. We can discuss this tonight." I was halfway to my car when my phone rang. Derek Ashby's name appeared on the screen. This was unexpected. "Hello, Derek." "Mason, thank God. I think my phone's been hacked. I'm getting calls from Monica asking about messages I never sent, and my boss received some kind of forwarded conversation about a real estate deal I never discussed with anyone." I smiled, remembering the automatic forwarding rule I'd set up on Seren's email account before removing her access. Every message she'd exchanged with Derek had been quietly forwarded to both his wife and his business email. "That sounds serious, Derek. You should probably contact your IT department. This is crazy. Monica's threatening to call a lawyer, and she's asking about some resort in Asheville. I've never been to Asheville. Haven't you?" I let the question hang in the air. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear Derek's breathing change. "Mason, if this is about Seren, have a good day, Derek." I hung up and drove to work, where I spent a productive 8 hours implementing security protocols for Morrison Tech's new client database. It felt good to solve problems that had clear solutions. When I returned home that evening, Seren was waiting in the living room with a folder of documents and her laptop. "We need to talk." "Absolutely." I sat down across from her, noting she'd chosen the chair that put her back to the window, a power position she'd learned in her management training. "I've spoken with my attorney. That was fast. Mason, what you did today was financial abuse. Cutting off someone's access to marital assets without warning is illegal." I nodded thoughtfully. "That's interesting. What did your attorney say about adultery and fraudulent use of credit cards? Her confident expression flickered. That's not what this is about. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. Because I have a recording that suggests otherwise. I played 30 seconds of her conversation with Lila, just enough to let her hear her own voice saying Derek made her feel alive in ways I didn't. Seren's face went white. That's private. It was stored on our shared cloud account, the one you've been using for 3 years. I stopped the recording. Along with 6 months of text messages, photos from your romantic getaway, and detailed planning conversations about how to handle your husband when you got home. She stood up abruptly. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to sit here and be interrogated like some criminal. Then don't. I remained seated. But understand that as of today, every account, every service, every financial instrument that's in my name is secured. If you want access restored, we can discuss it through our attorneys. You can't do this, Mason. I'll fight you. I'm counting on it. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant she shifted from defense to offense. Her expression hardened, and she picked up her phone. Fine, if that's how you want to play this. She walked out of the room, and I heard her making a phone call upstairs. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. She was mobilizing her resources. 20 minutes later, she came back downstairs with 2 suitcases and a box of documents. I'm staying at Lila's tonight. Tomorrow, you're going to discover that 2 can play this game. After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my office, reviewing the files I'd copied from our shared accounts. 12 years of marriage, and I was just now seeing the real scope of my wife's planning and manipulation. But I'd learned something important today. Seren was methodical, but she wasn't careful. She documented everything, saved every conversation, kept records of every plan. She'd been so confident in her control over our relationship that she'd never considered the possibility that her own thoroughness might be turned against her. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Erin, who lived 2 hours away in Charlotte. Mom called. She says Seren reached out to her tonight, very upset. Says you've been controlling and manipulative and she's scared. What's going on? I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, Can you drive up this weekend? I need a lawyer, and I need someone who knows me well enough to know when I'm telling the truth. That bad? Worse, but I have documentation. I'll be there Saturday morning. I set the phone aside and opened my laptop. If Seren wanted to wage a campaign for hearts and minds, she was about to discover that her husband had spent 15 years in IT security for a reason. I understood systems, networks, and information warfare. And I'd just been given every piece of ammunition I needed. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, typical for November in Charlotte. I'd spent Friday evening organizing files and printing documents, creating a timeline that read like a thriller novel. If thriller novels featured suburban HR directors and their methodical betrayals. Erin knocked at 7:30, carrying a travel mug of coffee and wearing the expression she'd perfected during law school, skeptical, but prepared to listen. You look terrible, she said, stepping into the foyer. Thanks, coffee's fresh. My sister had always been direct. 3 years younger than me, she'd spent her career as a family law attorney, which meant she'd seen every variation of marital breakdown imaginable. If anyone could give me an honest assessment of my situation, it was Erin. We sat at the kitchen table, and I handed her the folder I'd prepared. Start with the timeline, I said. Everything's documented. She opened the folder and began reading, her expression shifting from skeptical to surprised to something approaching anger as she worked through the evidence. Holy cow, Mason. She's been planning this for months. 6 months based on the earliest text messages I found. And she documented all of it? Everything. Photos, messages, voice memos, even a spreadsheet where she calculated the cost difference between divorcing me now versus waiting until my Morrison Tech contract expires next year. Erin looked up from the papers. She made a spreadsheet? complete with projected alimony calculations and asset division scenarios. She shook her head. That's either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant. Both, I think. She was so confident I'd never find out, or that I'd be too devastated to fight back effectively. Erin continued reading, occasionally making notes in the margins. When she reached the voice memo transcript, she whistled softly. This is damaging. But Mason, how did you access all this? Please tell me you didn't hack her accounts. I didn't need to. Everything was stored on our shared cloud service, backed up automatically from her phone. Technically, I was accessing my own account. That's actually legally sound. Sneaky, but sound. She flipped to the next page. What about the financial moves you made? Every account was in my name, with her as an authorized user. I have the legal right to modify or revoke that authorization at any time. And the forwarding of her messages to Derek's wife and employer? I explained the email forwarding rule I'd set up before revoking her access. The messages were sent from our shared account to addresses that were already in the contact list. I didn't create new communications, I just ensured existing communications reached their intended recipients. Erin was quiet for several minutes, reviewing the documents again. Okay, she said finally. Legally, you're on solid ground. Everything you did was within your rights as the account holder. But Mason, Seren's not going to take this quietly. As if summoned by her words, my phone rang. My mother's number appeared on the screen. I should take this. Mason David Redden. Mom's voice carried the tone she'd used when I was 12 and had broken the neighbor's window with a baseball. What is going on with you and Seren? Hi, Mom. What did she tell you? She called me crying last night, said you'd locked her out of your accounts without warning, that you'd been controlling and suspicious for months. She's scared, Mason. I looked at Erin, who nodded encouragingly. Mom, did she mention where she's been for the past 2 weeks? She said she needed some time to think about your marriage. That's not unusual, honey. Sometimes couples need space. She spent 2 weeks at a resort in North Carolina with her ex-boyfriend. In the honeymoon suite. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Mason, that can't be right. I have the hotel receipts, Mom, and photos, and text messages between them dating back 6 months. Another long pause. Send me what you have, Mom said quietly. I need to see this for myself. After I hung up, Erin leaned back in her chair. How many people has she contacted? Based on her call log from yesterday, at least a dozen. Your parents, mine, her sister, several mutual friends, and someone at her office. She's trying to control the narrative, which means I need to get ahead of it. Erin nodded. What's your plan? I opened my laptop and showed her the email I'd drafted the night before. It was addressed to the same list of people Seren had contacted, with the subject line, Setting the Record Straight. The email was factual, chronological, and devastating. I'd included the timeline, key pieces of evidence, and a simple explanation of my actions. No emotional language, no accusations beyond what the evidence clearly supported. This is good, Erin said after reading it. Professional, documented, and you're not asking anyone to take sides. You're just presenting facts. Should I send it? Absolutely. But Mason, be prepared for pushback. Some people won't want to believe this about Seren. She's been cultivating relationships with your family and friends for 12 years. I hit send and immediately felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. There was no taking it back now. My phone started ringing within minutes. The first call was from Drew Martinez, my best friend since college and the owner of Murphy's Pub downtown. Dude, what the heck is going on? Seren called me yesterday saying you'd lost it, and now I'm reading about hotel receipts and voice recordings. It's all true, Drew. Everything in that email. Man, I'm sorry, I had no idea, but listen, she's been calling around to our whole group. She's planning something. What kind of something? She wants to meet tonight at Murphy's. Says she needs to tell her side of the story before you poison everyone against her with lies. I looked at Aaron, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation. What time? I asked. 8 o'clock. Mason, you don't have to. I'll be there. After I hung up, Aaron shook her head. That's a bad idea. She's choosing the venue, the timing, and the audience. You'll be walking into an ambush. Maybe, but if I don't show up, it looks like I'm hiding. Besides, I have something she doesn't know about. Which is? I opened a new folder on my laptop, one I'd created that morning after discovering an additional backup file I'd missed the night before. A second voice recording, this one from yesterday after I locked her out of the accounts. I played the file. Serene's voice was clear, speaking to someone on the phone. Lila, he's smarter than I thought. He found everything. No, I can't go back to Derek now. Monica's threatening to take half his assets, and his boss is asking questions. I need to make Mason look unstable, controlling, maybe dangerous. If I can document a pattern of escalating behavior, I can get a restraining order and force him out of the house. Aaron's eyes widened. She's planning to frame you. And she's doing it systematically. I checked our home security system this morning. She came back while I was at work yesterday and moved things around, took photos. She's building a case that I've been monitoring and controlling her. Which, technically, you have been. With cause, and with evidence of her infidelity and fraud. Aaron stood up and paced to the window. Mason, this is escalating fast. Serene's not just trying to win a divorce. She's trying to destroy you. Then we'd better make sure she doesn't succeed. That afternoon, I received a call from Monica Ashby, Derek's wife. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. Mr. Redden, I believe we should meet. I'd be happy to. When and where? Today, if possible. I have some things I think you should see. We met at a coffee shop near her office. Monica was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, impeccably dressed and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd built her own successful marketing firm. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Derek's been sloppy, she said, without preamble. I found these in his home office. Inside the envelope were printed emails, receipts, and what appeared to be a contract. What am I looking at? A relationship agreement between your wife and my husband. They drafted it 3 months ago, outlining how they'd handle their affair, including financial arrangements and a timeline for leaving their respective spouses. I read through the document, which was surprisingly detailed. Derek had agreed to pay for their getaways and provide Serene with a monthly allowance. In return, she'd agreed to file for divorce by December and move in with him by February. Monica, this is legally binding? Probably not. Morally reprehensible? Absolutely. She leaned forward. Mr. Redden, I'm filing for divorce next week. Derek's going to lose half of everything he's built, plus alimony, plus the reputation damage from this becoming public. What do you want from me? Cooperation. I assume you're planning to divorce Serene as well. If we coordinate our efforts, we can ensure both of them face consequences for what they've done. I thought about Serene's plan to meet at Murphy's that evening, her strategy to paint me as controlling and unstable. Monica, how would you feel about attending a social gathering tonight? She smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. I thought you'd never ask. Murphy's pub was crowded for a Saturday night, which worked in my favor. Drew had reserved the back room, but I could see our entire social circle through the glass partition. About 15 people who'd known Serene and me as a couple for years. I arrived at 8:15, deliberately late. Serene was already holding court, gesturing expressively as she spoke to our friends. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a simple dress that made her look vulnerable, minimal makeup to emphasize the supposed stress she'd been under. When I walked in, the conversation stopped. Mason. Serene's voice was carefully modulated, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm glad you came. I was just explaining to everyone how difficult things have been lately. I'm sure you were. I took a seat across from her, noting the strategic positioning that put her back to the wall and me in the center of the room. "Serene's been telling us about some concerning behavior," said Janet, one of her co-workers. "She says you've been monitoring her communications and controlling her access to money." "That's true," I said simply. The admission caused a ripple of surprise through the room. "I've been monitoring communications stored on our shared accounts, and I did restrict her access to our financial resources. Would you like to know why?" Before Seren could object, I opened my laptop and connected it to the room's display screen, a feature Drew had installed for sports viewing that was about to serve a very different purpose. "This is a timeline of the past 6 months," I said, bringing up the first slide. "Documented through messages, photos, and financial records that were stored on our shared cloud service." I walked through the evidence methodically. The text messages between Seren and Derek, the planning conversations with Lila, the photos from their romantic getaway, the relationship agreement Monica had provided. The room was silent except for the sound of people shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. "This voice recording was made accidentally on November 2nd, I said, queuing up the audio. 3 days ago." Serene's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable, discussing her plan to frame me as controlling and dangerous. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute. "Seren," said Mike Chen, one of our longtime friends. "Is this real?" She looked around the room, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling in real time. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "Mason's been distant for months. Our marriage has been over for—" The door to the back room opened, and Monica Ashby walked in. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "I was meeting with my attorney about my husband's affair." Seren's face went completely white. Monica took a seat and looked directly at Seren. "I believe you know my husband, Derek. You've been planning quite a future together, haven't you?" The confrontation that followed was swift and decisive. Monica presented the relationship agreement, detailing the financial arrangements Derek and Seren had made. Our friends asked pointed questions that Seren couldn't answer convincingly. The narrative she'd tried to construct, of a controlling husband and a wife seeking emotional healing, collapsed under the weight of documented evidence. By 9:30, the room had cleared except for Drew, Aaron, Monica, and me. Seren had left without saying goodbye, her phone pressed to her ear as she made what was probably a frantic call to Lila. "Well," Drew said, cleaning glasses behind the makeshift bar. "That was more entertaining than the football game would have been." Monica gathered her papers. "Mr. Redden, I'll have my attorney contact yours about coordinating our divorce proceedings. I think we can help each other ensure justice is served." After she left, Aaron turned to me. "You realize this isn't over, right? Serene's going to escalate." "I'm counting on it." "Mason, she's desperate now. Desperate people do unpredictable things." I thought about the voice recording, about Seren's plan to make me look dangerous and unstable, about the photos she'd taken in our house, documenting what she'd claim was evidence of controlling behavior. Then we'd better be ready for whatever comes next. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you've started." I showed the message to Aaron. "Seren?" "Probably. Or Derek." I deleted the message. Either way, they're right. This is just getting started. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was reviewing Morrison Tech's security protocols over coffee when the doorbell rang at 8:15. Through the peephole, I saw Derek Ashby standing on my front porch looking like he hadn't slept. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "We need to talk," he said. "Do we?" Derek looked past me into the house, probably wondering if Seren was inside. She wasn't. According to Lila's social media posts, they'd driven to Atlanta for what Lila called a healing weekend. "Mason, this thing between you and Seren doesn't have to involve me and Monica." "Doesn't it?" I leaned against the doorframe. "You signed a relationship agreement with my wife. You've been funding her affair for months. You took her to a resort and upgraded to the honeymoon suite. Which part of that doesn't involve you? His face flushed. That was between consenting adults, one of whom was married to someone else, using credit cards in that someone else's name. Look, I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Derek. I'm methodical. There's a difference. He shifted uncomfortably. What do you want? I want you to stay away from my wife, stay away from my house, and deal with the consequences of your choices like an adult. And if I don't? I smiled. Then you'll discover that IT security consultants know a lot about information systems, including the ones your real estate firm uses to store client data. It was a bluff, but Derek didn't know that. His face went pale. You can't threaten my business. I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply observing that people who make poor personal choices often make poor professional choices as well. Have a good day, Derek. I closed the door and watched through the window as he stood on my porch for another minute before walking back to his car. As he drove away, I noticed a familiar vehicle parked across the street, Seren's Honda Civic. She'd been watching the entire conversation. My phone rang immediately. What did Derek want? Serene's voice was tense. To negotiate terms of surrender, I think. Mason, this has gone far enough. We need to talk like adults. I agree. When would you like to meet with our attorneys? I meant just us. Without lawyers, without your sister, without Monica Ashby stirring up trouble. I walked to the front window and waved at her car. She didn't wave back. Seren, you spent 6 months planning to leave me for another man. You documented your affair in excruciating detail. You tried to frame me as controlling and dangerous. What exactly do we have to discuss? Our future. The house. How we're going to handle this divorce without destroying each other. You should have thought about that before you upgraded to the honeymoon suite. I hung up and watched her car drive away. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. Check your email, now. The email was from someone named Patricia Williams at Hendricks, Williams & Associates, a law firm I'd never heard of. The subject line read, Notice of Intent to File Restraining Order. The message was brief and professionally threatening. Ms. Williams represented Seren Redden in matters related to domestic disputes and protective orders. She was writing to inform me that her client was prepared to file for emergency protection based on a pattern of escalating controlling behavior, financial abuse, and implied threats. Unless I agreed to mediate the matter through proper legal channels, the filing would proceed within 48 hours. I forwarded the email to Erin and called her immediately. They're moving fast, she said without preamble. Can they get a restraining order based on what I've done? Probably not. But they can try. And even if they fail, the filing becomes public record. It's a reputation management strategy. Meaning Serene's trying to get ahead of the narrative again. If she can paint you as potentially dangerous, it shifts focus away from her affair and onto your response to her affair. I thought about Derek's visit, about Seren watching from across the street. Aaron, I think they're trying to provoke me into doing something stupid. What do you mean? I explained Derek's visit and Serene's immediate phone call. They're documenting everything, I realized. Building a case that I'm escalating, becoming threatening. Which means you need to be very careful about your next moves. But I was already thinking about the one move Seren couldn't predict, the one legal option I'd discovered while reviewing our property documents the night before. Aaron, remember the house purchase agreement we signed 7 years ago? Vaguely. Why? There's a clause Seren signed that gives either spouse the right to sell the property without the other's consent in cases of documented infidelity. That's unusual. It was Derek's idea, actually. He was our real estate agent back then. Said it was standard protection against vindictive spouses who might try to hold property hostage during divorce proceedings. Aaron was quiet for a moment. Mason, that's either brilliant or catastrophic. If you're wrong about the legal language, I'm not wrong, I had a real estate attorney review it yesterday. You've been busy. I've been thorough. Seren wants to play legal games? Let's play. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day at the county courthouse and the offices of Pinnacle Realty. By 3 o'clock, I had a purchase agreement signed by a cash buyer who specialized in quick closings. By 5 o'clock, the house was sold. I drove to Lila's apartment complex and knocked on the door. Seren answered, looking relaxed in a way that suggested she felt safe in her friend's space. Mason? What are you doing here? Delivering some documents. I handed her a manila envelope. The closing is tomorrow at 10 a.m. She opened the envelope and stared at the purchase agreement. You can't sell our house without my consent. Actually, I can. Page 12 of our original purchase agreement, subsection C. You signed it 7 years ago. I watched her face as she read the clause, saw the moment she understood what had happened. Derek wrote this clause. Ironic, isn't it? Mason, you can't do this. I have nowhere to go. You have Derek. Wasn't that the plan? His wife froze his accounts. He can't afford to rent anything right now. I felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy, but then I remembered the voice recording of her planning to frame me as dangerous. That sounds like a Derek problem. Where am I supposed to live? I don't know, Seren. Where were you planning to live after you destroyed my reputation and got me arrested on false charges? Her face flushed. I never said anything about having you arrested. Maybe dangerous, I quoted from her recorded conversation. If I can document a pattern of escalating behavior, I can get a restraining order and force him out of the house. Your words. She looked away. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The pressure of conducting a 6-month affair while planning to destroy your husband's life? Yeah, that does sound stressful. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Serene? You might want to check your work email. I think your boss received some interesting voice recordings about how you really feel about company policies and your coworkers. Her face went white. You didn't. I didn't send them directly. But you know how these things work. Files get shared, people forward interesting content to their friends. Information has a way of spreading. I left her standing in Lila's doorway and drove home to pack. The new owners were taking possession in 48 hours, which gave me just enough time to sort through 12 years of accumulated possessions. My phone rang as I was wrapping dishes in the kitchen. Drew's name appeared on the screen. Dude, you need to get down to Murphy's right now. Why? Serene's here with Derek and that lawyer friend of hers. They're holding some kind of press conference, telling everyone you've lost your mind and become dangerous. I looked around the kitchen, at the boxes of dishes and the life I was methodically dismantling. How many people? Maybe 20. But Mason, she's recording everything. She's got her phone set up like she's live streaming this. I'll be right there. I grabbed my laptop and the folder of documents I'd been carrying everywhere for the past week. If Seren wanted a public confrontation, she was about to get more than she'd bargained for. Murphy's was more crowded than usual for a Monday night, and I could see why. Word had spread through our social circle that something dramatic was happening. Seren had claimed one of the high-top tables near the center of the room, with Derek standing beside her and a woman I didn't recognize taking notes. She was indeed recording, her phone propped up to capture both her face and the room around her. Pattern of escalating control and retaliation, she was saying as I walked in. He's systematically trying to destroy my life because I asked for space to think about our marriage. I approached the table and set my laptop down next to her phone. Mind if I join the press conference? The room went quiet. Serene's confident expression flickered as she realized I wasn't going to slink away or lose my temper. Mason, you shouldn't be here. Why? Because you're spreading lies about me to our friends? I'm telling people the truth about what you've done. Are you? I opened my laptop and connected to Murphy's Wi-Fi. Because I have some truth to share as well. I pulled up the presentation I'd prepared. the same one I'd shown Saturday night but expanded with additional evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the room like I was giving a work presentation, "let me tell you about the real timeline of my marriage's end." What followed was 15 minutes of methodical character assassination. I presented every piece of evidence in chronological order: the affair, the planning, the financial manipulation, the attempt to frame me as dangerous. I played the voice recordings, showed the text messages, displayed the relationship agreement Derek and Seren had signed. The room was silent, except for the sound of people shifting uncomfortably and the occasional gasp as new information was revealed. When I finished, I looked directly at Seren's phone camera. So yes, I locked my cheating wife out of our financial accounts. Yes, I sold the house she was planning to steal from me in a fraudulent divorce proceeding. And yes, I made sure everyone knew the truth about what she'd been doing behind my back for 6 months. I closed the laptop and looked around the room. Anyone have questions? The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Janet, Serene's co-worker, spoke up. "Seren, is this all true?" Serene looked around the room, at faces that had been sympathetic an hour earlier and were now skeptical or openly hostile. "You don't understand," she said, her voice smaller than before. "Mason's been emotionally unavailable for months. Our marriage was already over." "So you decided to end it by conducting an affair and planning to destroy his reputation." This from Mike Chen, who'd been friends with both of us for years. "I never meant for things to go this far." Derek, who'd been silent throughout my presentation, finally spoke up. "This is all taken out of context. Mason's twisting everything to make us look bad." I turned to him. "Derek, would you like me to play the recording where you and Seren discuss the timeline for divorcing your respective spouses and moving in together?" He didn't answer. "Or maybe the one where you calculate how much money you'll save on hotel rooms once you're living together full-time?" "That's enough," said the woman I didn't recognize, who I assumed was Patricia Williams. "Mr. Redden, you're harassing my clients." "Am I? Because they're the ones who called this public meeting. I'm just providing context." I packed up my laptop and looked at Seren one more time. "You wanted everyone to know your side of the story. Now they know both sides. Let them decide who's telling the truth." As I walked toward the door, Drew caught my arm. "Mason, where are you going to live?" "I've got a furnished apartment lined up downtown. Short-term lease while I figure out what comes next." "And Seren?" I looked back at the table where she sat with Derek and her attorney, surrounded by people who were no longer looking at her with sympathy. That's not my problem anymore. Outside, I sat in my car for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. My phone buzzed with text messages from people who'd been in the bar, some supportive, some asking for more details, some just expressing shock at the evening's revelations. But the message that caught my attention was from Monica Ashby. "Saw the live stream. Well played. Derek's moving out tomorrow. I thought you should know he's desperate now. Be careful." I started the car and drove toward my new apartment, wondering what desperate people do when they've lost everything they thought they could count on. I was about to find out. Tuesday morning brought a call from Morrison Tech's HR department. Angela Rodriguez, the director, sounded uncomfortable as she explained that they'd received a complaint about my conduct. "What kind of complaint?" "Someone claiming to be your wife called yesterday. She says you've been using company resources to harass her and her friends, and that you've made threats about accessing private business systems." I thought about my conversation with Derek on Sunday, about my veiled reference to his real estate firm's data systems. "Angela, I haven't used any company resources for personal matters, and I haven't accessed any systems outside our client contracts." "I believe you, Mason, but we need to document this conversation. Can you come in this afternoon?" "Of course." After I hung up, I realized Seren and Derek were escalating their campaign. If they could get me fired, it would support their narrative that I was unstable and potentially dangerous. My phone rang again, This time it was Aaron. "Mason, we have a problem. Seren's attorney filed for an emergency restraining order this morning." "Based on what?" "They're claiming you made implied threats about Derek's business, that you've been following Seren, and that your behavior at Murphy's last night constituted public harassment." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, surrounded by boxes of my former life. Can they make it stick? Maybe. The judge will hear their side first, and they're very good at presenting selective evidence. You need to get down here with everything you have. I'll be there in an hour. But as I was loading my laptop and files into the car, I noticed something odd. A white sedan had been parked across the street when I'd gotten up that morning. It was still there, and I could see someone in the driver's seat. I pretended to check my mailbox and got a better look at the car. The driver was a woman I didn't recognize, but she was definitely watching my house. I got in my car and drove toward downtown, checking my mirrors. The white sedan followed, staying 2 cars back but making the same turns I made. Instead of going directly to Aaron's office, I took a detour through the downtown business district, making several unnecessary turns. The sedan stayed with me. At a red light, I called Aaron. "I'm being followed." "What do you mean?" "White sedan, unknown driver. She's been watching my house and tailing me for the past 20 minutes. "Mason, that's either very bad or very good for us." "How is being stalked good?" "Because if they're having you followed, it means they're trying to document behavior that supports their restraining order petition, which means they're probably recording everything." I looked in my rearview mirror at the sedan. The driver was holding up a phone pointed in my direction. "Aaron, I have an idea, but I need you to trust me." "I don't like the sound of that." "Can you meet me at the Morrison Tech building in 30 minutes? Bring everything we have on Seren and Derek." "Mason, what are you planning?" "To give them exactly what they think they want." I drove to Morrison Tech's downtown office building, a 12-story glass structure where I'd been working for the past 3 years. The white sedan followed me into the parking garage. I parked near the elevator and waited. The sedan parked 3 spaces away, and I got a clear look at the driver, a middle-aged woman with short brown hair, holding a phone and what looked like a small camera. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. When the doors opened, I stepped inside but held the door open button. "Excuse me," I called to the woman in the sedan. "Are you looking for someone?" She ducked down, trying to hide behind her steering wheel. "Because if you're here to see me, we should probably talk." The elevator doors started to close, and I let them. But instead of going up to my floor, I pressed the button for the parking level and waited. When the doors opened again, I walked back toward the sedan. The woman was on her phone, speaking urgently to someone. "He knows I'm here. What should I do?" I approached her car and tapped on the window. She looked up, startled, and I could see she was indeed recording. "Hi there. I'm Mason Redden. You've been following me around town, so I thought we should introduce ourselves." She rolled down her window slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You were parked outside my house this morning, and you've been tailing me for the past hour. Are you working for Patricia Williams?" "I'm not required to answer your questions." "You're absolutely right. But you are required to have a license if you're working as a private investigator in this state." Her face went pale. "I'm not a private investigator." "Then you're just a private citizen who's been stalking me, which is actually worse, legally speaking." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Can you state your name for the record?" "I don't have to." "You don't have to do anything, but I'm documenting this encounter for my attorney since you've been following me and recording me without consent." The woman ended her phone call and started her car. "I'm leaving." "That's probably a good idea. But you should know that stalking is a felony in this state, and I have you on camera admitting you've been following me." She drove away quickly, tires squealing slightly on the concrete floor of the parking garage. My phone rang immediately. Derek's number. "Mason, what the heck do you think you're doing?" "Having a conversation with someone who's been stalking me." Was that your idea or Seren's? Nobody's stalking you. Lisa is a friend of Seren's who was worried about her safety. Lisa doesn't have a private investigator's license, Derek, which means what she's been doing is illegal. You can't prove. I can prove she followed me from my house to my office building. I can prove she was recording me without consent. And I can prove you just admitted you know who she is and why she was following me. The silence on Derek's end stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. What do you want? He said finally. I want you and Seren to stop trying to destroy my life. I want you to withdraw the restraining order petition, and I want both of you to stay away from me. And if we don't, then you'll discover that I'm much better at this game than either of you realized. I hung up and called Aaron. Change of plans. I'm coming to your office now and I have new evidence. What kind of evidence? The kind that proves they're not just trying to get a restraining order. They're trying to manufacture grounds for one. Aaron's office was in a converted Victorian house near the courthouse, all hardwood floors and high ceilings that made every conversation feel important. I spread my files across her conference table and added the video I'd just recorded in the parking garage. This is good, Aaron said after reviewing everything. Really good. They've overplayed their hand. How so? By having you followed and recorded, they've created evidence of their own misconduct. And Derek's admission on the phone call ties him directly to the stalking. What about the restraining order hearing? We're going to turn it around on them. Instead of defending against their petition, we're going to file a counter-petition based on their harassment and stalking. Can we do that? We can, and we should. Mason, they've made a critical error. They've documented their own conspiracy to frame you. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This ends now. Meet me at 1247 Industrial Way at 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone. I showed the message to Aaron. That's Derek, I said. I recognize the phrasing. Don't go. Why not? Because it's obviously a trap. They're trying to get you to do something that supports their restraining order petition. I thought about the white sedan, about Derek's desperation, about Serene's plan to paint me as dangerous. Aaron, what if we turned the trap around? What do you mean? What if I go, but I'm prepared for whatever they're planning? That's a terrible idea. Is it? Because right now, they're controlling the narrative. They're making moves, and I'm reacting. What if I made a move they weren't expecting? Aaron leaned back in her chair. What did you have in mind? I pulled up a map on my phone and searched for the address Derek had sent. It was an industrial area near the river, mostly warehouses and manufacturing facilities. I'm going to meet Derek, but I'm going to do it on my terms, with backup, and with everything recorded. Mason, this is dangerous. No, Aaron. Dangerous is letting them continue to control the situation. Dangerous is waiting for them to make their next move. This is strategic. I spent the next 2 hours planning what I hoped would be the final confrontation with Derek and Seren. If they wanted to meet, we'd meet. But they were about to discover that IT security consultants are very good at preparing for hostile environments. At 7:30, I drove toward Industrial Way, knowing that whatever happened in the next hour would determine how this entire situation resolved. I was ready for it to be over. The address Derek had sent led to a warehouse complex near the river, the kind of place where small manufacturing companies rented space by the month. At 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, the area was deserted, except for a few security lights casting long shadows between the buildings. I parked across the street and called Aaron. I'm here. Are you in position? Drew and I are parked behind the building next door. We can see your car and the warehouse entrance. And you're recording everything? Everything. Mason, are you sure about this? I looked at the warehouse. Derek's Tesla was parked near the loading dock, along with Serene's Honda and a third car I didn't recognize. They brought backup too. This is definitely a setup. It's not too late to leave. Yes, it is. I got out of my car and walked toward the warehouse, my phone recording and transmitting everything to a cloud service Aaron could access. Whatever happened next, there would be documentation. The loading dock door was open, and I could see Derek pacing inside under harsh, fluorescent lights. Seren sat on a folding chair, and the third person was Patricia Williams, the attorney. Mason. Derek's voice echoed in the empty space. Thanks for coming. Did I have a choice? We all have choices. That's what this is about. I stepped into the warehouse but stayed near the door. The space was mostly empty except for some industrial equipment covered by tarps and a few stacks of wooden pallets. What do you want, Derek? To end this. All of it. The lawyers, the restraining orders, the public humiliation. We want to make a deal. Seren stood up. Mason, this has gotten out of hand. We're all losing here. Are we? Because from where I stand, you're the ones who lost your jobs, your reputations, and your relationships. I'm doing fine. Patricia Williams stepped forward. Mr. Redden, my clients are prepared to offer you a settlement, full withdrawal of all legal proceedings, a mutual non-disclosure agreement, and financial compensation for your inconvenience. How much financial compensation? $50,000. I laughed. You want to pay me $50,000 to keep quiet about your affair and your attempt to frame me as dangerous? We want to pay you to disappear, Derek said, his voice harder now. Take the money, sign the agreement, and move somewhere else. Start over. And if I don't? Derek walked closer, and I noticed he was holding something in his right hand, a small recording device. If you don't, things are going to get very difficult for you. We have evidence of stalking, harassment, and implied threats. We have witnesses who will testify that you've become unstable and potentially violent. What witnesses? Lisa, for one. The woman you threatened in the parking garage today. You mean the woman you hired to stalk me illegally? We mean the woman you cornered and intimidated, Patricia Williams said. A woman who was simply trying to document your escalating behavior for her friend's safety. I looked around the warehouse, at the three people who'd orchestrated this meeting, and realized they'd made a fundamental miscalculation. You know what's interesting about this conversation? I said, pulling out my phone. You're admitting to conspiracy, witness tampering, and extortion. All on the record. Derek's face flushed. You can't record us without consent. Actually, I can. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, which means I only need my own permission to record conversations I'm part of. That recording won't be admissible. In court? Maybe not. On social media? Absolutely. I saw the moment Derek realized he'd been outmaneuvered. His expression shifted from confident to desperate. Mason, don't do this. We can work something out. We already worked something out. You lost your wife, your reputation, and your business relationships. Seren lost her job, her home, and her credibility. I'd say we're even. You destroyed our lives, Seren said, her voice rising. Over what? A marriage that was already over? I didn't destroy anything. I just made sure everyone knew the truth about what you'd been doing. Derek stepped closer, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. You think you're so smart, don't you? With your computers and your evidence and your recordings. But you made one mistake. Which is, you came here alone. The warehouse's main lights suddenly went out, leaving only the security lighting from outside. In the dim illumination, I saw Derek moving toward me, but I was already backing toward the door. Drew, I said loudly, knowing my phone was still transmitting. Now would be good. The loading dock suddenly filled with light as Drew's truck pulled up outside, headlights blazing. At the same time, I heard sirens in the distance. What did you do? Patricia Williams demanded. I called the police 20 minutes ago and reported a potential assault in progress at this address. They should be here any minute. Derek stopped moving toward me. You set us up. You set yourselves up. I just made sure there would be witnesses. The sirens were getting closer. Derek, Seren, and Patricia Williams looked at each other with growing panic. "This is entrapment," Patricia Williams said. "No, this is documentation. You invited me here, you offered me money to disappear, and you just cut the lights in what any reasonable person would interpret as preparation for an assault." The first police car pulled into the parking lot, followed by a second. Through my phone, I could hear Aaron coordinating with the officers. "Officers!" I called out as they approached the loading dock. "I'm Mason Redden. I'm the one who called this in." What followed was 2 hours of statements, evidence review, and careful documentation. Derek, Seren, and Patricia Williams each gave their version of events, but the recording I'd made of the entire encounter told a very different story. By 11 p.m., Derek had been arrested for attempted assault and conspiracy. Patricia Williams was facing ethics charges for her role in the extortion attempt. Seren was released with a warning, but her involvement in the stalking and conspiracy was now part of the official record. As the police cars drove away, I stood in the warehouse parking lot with Drew and Aaron, processing what had just happened. "Is it over?" Drew asked. "Almost," I said. "There's one more thing I need to do." The next morning, I called Monica Ashby. "I thought you should know that Derek was arrested last night." "I heard. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. But Monica, I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "Your divorce proceedings and mine are going to be messy and expensive. What if we coordinated our efforts to minimize the damage and maximize the consequences for Derek and Seren?" "What did you have in mind?" "A joint civil suit. Fraud, conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We have documentation of everything they did, and now we have criminal charges to support our case." Monica was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Redden, I think that's an excellent idea." That afternoon, I met with Aaron and Monica's attorney to draft the civil suit. The document was comprehensive and devastating, laying out the entire timeline of Derek and Seren's affair, their conspiracy to defraud their respective spouses, and their attempt to frame me as dangerous when their plan began to unravel. But the most satisfying part wasn't the legal action. It was the email I sent to everyone in our social circle, the same people who'd received Seren's initial lies about my behavior. The email was simple and factual. Last night, Derek Ashby was arrested for attempted assault and conspiracy. The attached police report and court documents provide full details about the events leading to his arrest, including his affair with my wife and their attempt to extort money from me to keep quiet about their relationship. I attached the police report, the recording from the warehouse, and a timeline of evidence showing the full scope of their deception. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with messages of support, apologies from people who'd initially believed Seren's version of events, and expressions of shock at how far the situation had escalated. But the message that meant the most came from my mother. "I'm sorry I doubted you. Come home for dinner Sunday. We need to talk." Friday afternoon, I was packing up my temporary apartment when Seren called. "Mason, we need to talk." "Do we?" "Please, just please." She sounded different, smaller, defeated. "Where?" "Neutral ground, the coffee shop on 5th Street. I found her sitting at a corner table looking older than she had a week earlier. The confident, manipulative woman who'd returned from her closure trip had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely lost. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "What do you want, Seren?" "To apologize, and to ask you not to destroy me completely." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion. "You tried to have me arrested on false charges." "I know. You spent 6 months planning to leave me while pretending our marriage was worth saving." "I know. You documented every step of your affair, and then tried to frame me as controlling when I found out about it." "I know." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "So what exactly are you apologizing for? Getting caught?" She looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something genuine in her expression. "I'm apologizing for forgetting who you were, for thinking you were weak enough to let me destroy you without fighting back. And for underestimating how thoroughly you'd win when you decided to fight." I leaned back in my chair. "Seren, you didn't just cheat on me. You tried to destroy my reputation, my relationships, and my career. You conspired with your lover to frame me as dangerous. You hired someone to stalk me. What did you think was going to happen? I thought you'd be hurt and angry, but that you'd eventually accept it and move on quietly." "Why would you think that?" "Because that's what you always did. Whenever we had problems, you'd withdraw and try to solve things logically instead of fighting with me." She wasn't wrong. For 12 years, I'd avoided confrontation, tried to find reasonable solutions to unreasonable problems. But this wasn't a problem to solve, Seren. This was a betrayal to expose. I know that now. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 12 years and 2 weeks settling between us. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you deal with the consequences of your choices. The divorce will be finalized within 60 days. The civil suit will probably take longer, but you'll lose that too. Derek's facing criminal charges, and you might be called as a witness. And after that? After that, you figure out how to rebuild your life without destroying someone else's in the process." I stood up to leave. "Mason?" "What?" "For what it's worth, I really did love you once." I looked at her one more time, this woman I'd been married to for 12 years, who'd shared my home and my bed and my dreams for the future. "I know you did. But Seren, love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day, and you chose Derek." I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. 3 weeks later, I thought it was over. The divorce papers were filed, the civil suit was progressing smoothly, and Derek was facing trial for assault and conspiracy charges. I'd moved into a furnished apartment downtown and was considering whether to stay in Charlotte or take a job offer I'd received from a tech company in Austin. Then Seren called with news that changed everything. "Mason, I need to see you. It's important. We've said everything we need to say. I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down heavily in my desk chair, staring out the window at the city skyline. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. I did the math quickly. 8 weeks ago, Seren had been on her closure trip with Derek. "Congratulations," I said carefully. "I assume Derek's excited about becoming a father." "It's not Derek's baby, Mason. It's yours." "That's impossible. We were together right before I left for that trip. You remember?" I did remember. One night in late September, after weeks of distance and tension, we'd had what I'd thought was a moment of reconnection. Now I realized it had probably been Seren's way of creating plausible deniability for whatever might result from her affair. "Seren, we used protection. Protection isn't 100% effective. DNA test." "What?" "I want a DNA test. If you're claiming the baby is mine, prove it." The silence on the other end of the call stretched long enough that I knew I'd hit the mark. "Mason, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. You've lied about everything else. Why would I believe you about this?" "Because I'm your wife. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife who spent 6 months planning to leave me for another man. Your credibility is somewhat limited." Another long pause. "Fine, we'll do a DNA test. But Mason, if this baby is yours, if this baby is mine, we'll discuss custody and support through our attorneys. If it's not, you and Derek can figure out how to raise it together. Derek doesn't want children. That's not my problem." After I hung up, I called Erin immediately. "She's playing her last card," Erin said after I explained the situation. "You think she's lying?" "I think she's desperate. The civil suit is going badly for her, she's facing financial ruin, and Derek's probably going to prison. A baby would complicate the divorce and potentially provide her with ongoing financial support. But what if she's not lying?" Then we deal with it. But Mason, don't let her manipulate you with this. Demand the DNA test, and don't make any decisions until you have facts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the timing, about Seren's strategic mind, about the possibility that she was carrying my child while simultaneously trying to destroy my life. My phone buzzed with a text at 2 a.m. We need to meet, tomorrow night. Derek's office building, rooftop level. Come alone, and we can settle this without lawyers. This time, the message came from Seren's number. I stared at the text, remembering the warehouse meeting and how badly that had gone for them. Why would they want another confrontation? Unless they were planning something different this time. I called Erin, waking her up. They want to meet again. Derek's office building. Absolutely not. Mason, you're not going to another one of their setups. What if this is my chance to end it? Really end it? What do you mean? I mean, what if I go, but I'm prepared for whatever they're planning? What if I turn their final play against them? How? I thought about Derek's office building, a 12-story glass structure in the downtown business district. I'd been there before, years ago, when he'd hosted a Christmas party for his real estate firm. Erin, how many people do you think would be interested in watching the final confrontation between Derek, Seren, and me? What are you thinking? I'm thinking about social media, about live streaming, about making sure that whatever happens tomorrow night, everyone sees it. Mason, that's either brilliant or insane. Maybe both. The next evening, I drove to Derek's office building with a plan that was probably too complicated to work, but too satisfying not to try. I'd spent the day setting up multiple camera angles, coordinating with Drew and Monica, and preparing for what I hoped would be the final chapter of this entire mess. Derek's building had rooftop access through an emergency stairwell, and the top floor had a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. If they wanted a dramatic setting for their final play, they'd chosen well. I took the elevator to the 11th floor and climbed the emergency stairs to the roof. The door was propped open, and I could see Derek and Seren waiting near the edge of the building, the city lights spread out behind them. Mason, Derek's voice carried across the rooftop. Thanks for coming. Let's get this over with. I walked toward them, noting that they'd positioned themselves between me and the stairwell door. Classic intimidation positioning. We've been thinking about your situation, Seren said. About the baby, about the divorce, about how we can all move forward. Have you? We're prepared to make you an offer, Derek said. A generous offer. I looked around the rooftop, at the city's skyline, at the two people who'd spent months trying to destroy my life. Before you make your offer, there's something you should know. What? I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. It displayed a live stream with over 200 viewers and climbing. We're broadcasting live to social media. Everyone can see and hear everything that happens up here. Derek's face went white. Turn that off. I don't think so. Serene stepped forward. Mason, this is private. Turn off the camera. Nothing about this situation has been private. You've involved our families, our friends, our co-workers, and half the city in your drama. Now they get to see how it ends. I looked directly into the camera. For those just joining us, I'm Mason Redden. I'm on a rooftop with my cheating wife, Seren, and her lover, Derek, who apparently have a final offer to make me. Let's hear it. Derek looked around wildly, probably calculating whether he could grab my phone without falling off the building. You can't broadcast this without our consent. Sure I can. We're in a public space and you invited me here. Say hello to the internet, Derek. The viewer count was climbing rapidly. I could see comments scrolling past, friends, co-workers, strangers who'd been following the story through social media. What's your offer? I asked. Seren looked at Derek, who nodded reluctantly. We'll withdraw all legal proceedings against you, she said. The restraining order petition, everything. In exchange, you drop the civil suit and agree to joint custody of the baby. Assuming the baby is mine. It is. Prove it. Derek stepped forward. Mason, be reasonable. Serene's pregnant, she needs support, and you're the father. Am I? Because 8 weeks ago, she was sharing the honeymoon suite with you. The comment thread on the live stream exploded with reactions. I could see people sharing the stream, tagging friends, spreading the link. The baby is yours, Seren insisted. I can prove it. How? She pulled out her phone and showed me what appeared to be a medical document. Ultrasound results. The conception date matches our last time together. I looked at the document, then at the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife is showing me an ultrasound that allegedly proves I'm the father of her baby. The same baby that was conceived during the time period when she was conducting an affair with Derek. I handed the phone back to her. Seren, this document shows a conception window of 2 weeks. You were with Derek for half of that time. But we were together right before I left. We were together once. You were with Derek for 2 weeks straight. Derek was getting agitated, pacing near the edge of the roof. This is ridiculous. Mason, take the deal or don't, but stop making a spectacle of everything. A spectacle? Derek, you tried to have me arrested on false charges. You hired someone to stalk me. You lured me to a warehouse and attempted to assault me. And now you want me to quietly accept financial responsibility for a baby that's probably yours. The viewer count had passed 500. I could see local news stations picking up the stream, sharing it on their own social media accounts. I want a DNA test, I said, looking directly at Serene. If the baby is mine, I'll take full responsibility. If it's not, Derek can figure out how to support his child from prison. I'm not going to prison, Derek said, his voice rising. Aren't you? Because you're facing assault charges, conspiracy charges, and now potential paternity fraud. How do you think that's going to work out for you? Derek stepped closer to me, and I could see he was losing control. You think you're so smart, don't you? With your cameras and your evidence and your social media games. But you're just a pathetic IT nerd who couldn't keep his wife happy. You're right, I said calmly. I am an IT nerd, which means I understand systems, networks, and information warfare. And Derek, you just lost the information war. I turned to face the camera directly. This is Mason Redden, signing off from what I hope is the final chapter of this story. Derek Ashby and Seren Redden tried to destroy my life through lies, manipulation, and fraud. They failed. The truth always wins in the end. Derek lunged toward me, probably trying to grab my phone, but I was already moving toward the stairwell. He stumbled, caught himself on the rooftop railing, and stood there breathing heavily as I reached the door. This isn't over, he called after me. Yes, it is. I walked down the stairs, out of the building, and into the parking garage where Drew and Monica were waiting with cameras of their own, having recorded the entire confrontation from multiple angles. How many viewers? Drew asked. I checked my phone. Over 1,000, and climbing. Think it worked? I looked back at the building where Derek and Seren were probably still standing on the rooftop, trying to figure out how to salvage their reputations after being exposed to hundreds of witnesses. I think it's finally over. The DNA test results came back 2 weeks later. The baby wasn't mine. Derek pled guilty to assault and conspiracy charges and received 18 months in prison. Seren moved to Atlanta to live with her sister, and I never saw her again. Monica and I won our civil suit, recovering damages for fraud and emotional distress. The settlement was large enough to let me take the job in Austin and start over completely. On my last day in Charlotte, I drove past the house Seren and I had shared for 7 years. The new owners had painted it blue and planted flowers in the front yard. It looked happy. I thought about the simple question that had started everything. Which credit card did you use on the third night? Sometimes the most devastating responses are the quietest ones. Sometimes the most effective revenge is simply making sure everyone knows the truth. I drove toward Austin, toward a new job and a new life, leaving the past exactly where it belonged, in the rearview mirror.